The series is tied 1-1 between Forty and Abracadabra, as Motherlode is our next dungeon, and was just an amazing run for Forty. But let's keep in mind, let's keep this in context, ironic. Forty still hasn't had their runs quite match up to their time trials just yet. So if Abracadabra is running their game and they're playing just at the same level as their time trials, they could take this.
Well, yeah, the time trial time that Abracadabra has in here is that 16:22 that we saw on the screen right now, and I think the time we saw from Forty in the previous match was something like 16:25.
So 30,
these
yeah,
guys are like
that.
neck and neck in how fast they go. And Abracadabra is the team that kind of premiered the double unholy DK in this dungeon, so it makes sense that, you know, we can't say Forty is going to win, but man, they've looked at home in here in their previous matches this week.
That's true, and that's another thing that's really important is how much these teams are practicing some of their dungeons and some of their expectations, right? If Forty has a good idea that they're going to wind up in the lower bracket at some point, and they say, well, we're going to be playing multiple different Motherlodes. That's got to be a big confidence boost for them, Naguro, if they're practicing it, winning every single time that they play on it, and now this is their round 3.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, in the end, this win matters more to Abra in theory, because Abra still has something to gain for the points for BlizzCon seeding, right? They need the ones who need to end up beating Method and A to get the 2nd seed over them. Well, Forty, they're the 4th seed. There's no way they can get the 3rd one, right? So Forty has a good spot for BlizzCon. It's still, you know, it's just for honor to win this higher cup and also get more prize money, of course, in this cup, but there's more on the line for Abra. So in theory, they're the ones who need to be more practiced, and they're the ones who need to be motivated to win the series here.
Not only that, we've kind of been, you know, slamming into this entire cup, this entire summer cup. More, I think for them, it's just got to be a self-confidence booster to get their best finish ever in cup play. So I'm really interested to see how they're able to play. The pressure's on the line. This is the 3rd time we've seen Motherlode from them this weekend. They've got to commit here. They've got to have a fantastic run in order to beat Abracadabra.
Yeah, so we see both of them immediately stealthing, which is something we've seen almost all of the time here. Almost all the teams are skipping this first trash here just because they don't want to deal with all of those different mobs at all. And now we're probably going to see a bloodlust from both of those teams as they gather up this huge pool. As you can see, Forty already popping the bloodlust before all of the mobs are even in. And Abra now popping their bloodlust as well. You see, unfortunately, there's a cast that went off on an assassin. That's why Divinefin has all of those poison stacks on top of him. And you see the whole group dropping so low. But as soon as the DKs ramp up their damage, those mobs are just going to die immediately. Wolf Disco unfortunately going down before he can do all of his damage. You can see Kurisu doing a lot more, but hopefully they can still finish this off.
And the thing that I was going to point out here, I can still point it out, so I'm going to point it out, is that the problem Forty has had with this first pull, even though they've been melting all of that small trash, the dangerous trash, and it might be more consistent to do it that way, from other teams, especially No Girls Allowed, if they were able to finish off their strategy, they would have beaten Forty in this dungeon because of how clean they were on this first pull. And it looks like Abracadabra is more clean. All of their Peacekeepers are sub 10% at this point, while Forty still has 2 Peacekeepers alive, and one of them is at like 30 or 40%. It looks like they kind of do their AoE a little bit too early before all the Peacekeepers are perfectly stacked up, and it just takes them longer to do the pull that way. That being said, it is a little bit of a bigger pull. They get 29% instead of 28%. But Abracadabra is already setting up their second pull while Forty is still running to it. It's just, this is 3 times in this dungeon now, where it seems like that's probably the defining factor in what made their 15-54 run in time trials. Probably just those Peacekeepers at the start saved them the 20-30 seconds alone.
Yeah, and then Abra, I mean, definitely not having any sort of issues here in the first pull. And if you look at the buffs, at the defensive and offensive cooldowns here that you can see below the player frames and the group frames all the way in the top, all of the, whenever there's a huge pull as the first one that we saw from both of those teams, the DKs and the rogues and everyone is just using their defenses preemptively. That's something we don't see that often. Usually you want to use it reactively in case something happens, or in order because there's some sort of AoE ability happening. But because of those trash packs, they're so scary, and you don't really know which target the thug is going to charge to. Therefore, they just use all of their defenses preemptively and hope they just brute force through those kind of pulls basically with their double DKs, and hope they don't get hit by any of the abilities once their defensives are down, or at least they hope the trash is dead once their defensives are down. Now Abra finished off their second pull already. They're on 50%, while Forty just a little bit behind. They're now on 48% once they finished off this Peacekeeper.
I want to say that was absolutely beautiful from Abracadabra. Those 3 Peacekeepers all died like half a second after each other, and we got a beautiful shot of all 3 dying in the same small line. Love to see that. And at the same time, Abracadabra's halfway done with their trash. after 2 pulls. Just goes to show how perfectly they have this dungeon mapped out. And it looks like Abracadabra is going for more of a no girls allowed strategy where they get to about 65-66% trash before they deal with the first boss, whereas we know from 40k, it's the 3rd time we've seen it this weekend, they like pulling their 3rd pull on top of coin-operated crowd pummeler and let the DKs do their work. After this first static pulse, they'll pop their army in the dead and they'll start going in on the boss here. We'll see how quickly they're going to be able to pull this boss. If I remember properly, we'll probably see them kill the boss by about the time Abracadabra starts pulling, if it's anywhere similar to what No Girls Allowed. I mean, all of these teams are so practiced in their strategies that it wouldn't surprise me to see similar things from Abracadabra that we saw from No Girls Allowed.
Yeah, this is so funny too, because each team is seeing some strats from another team and taking something here and there, and then it all just shapes up to be one whole strategy. Like the best strategy in each dungeon is just multiple small things that come from each team, right? And they just all add it up together to have one beautiful strategy. Now this thing that 40k is doing with pulling this trash pack on top of coin-operated crowd pummeler, that's actually something that Abracadabra did the very first time. They were the first team to pull this trash pack on top of the first boss, which is what Abracadabra is doing right now as well. So 40k definitely took this from Abra, and this is a very difficult pull as well, just because not only do you have to deal with the boss and all of the frontals that are happening, but you also have to deal with the huge area of denial that the Peacekeeper constantly casts in this fight.
Yeah, but this is almost exactly the same as what happened with No Girls Allowed. A little bit less trash percentage from Abracadabra, but because they're pulling trash on top of the boss, they're probably going to be at about the exact same trash percentage. And of course, we know Abracadabra's pull style is going to be the exact same thing 40k does. They'll do the hot butter pull, as we've coined it for some reason. I think that's a stupid name, but we're kind of committed to it at this point because we've said it for the past 2 weekends. So yeah, that strategy, and then of course they go to the extractor pull afterwards, where they'll cleave those 4 extractors, shadow meld the rest of the trash off afterwards, and then they'll be on to Azarok after that. Unfortunately for Abracadabra, Ashine does go down on the boss. They have a battle res available for him. That'll be their only one for the next 4.5 minutes, so not having that on the board for the next trash pull. Problem with that trash pull is if one of your Unholy DK goes down, like we saw from No Girls Allowed, the pull's pretty much over at that point. You need both of your Unholy DKs alive to finish off that pull and the time where your tank can stay alive, because there's just so much trash and there's so much residual tank damage going out. He's not going to live that long. 40k gearing up for this big pull.
Yeah, Smok actually having some trouble to heal the Grievous away on everybody. We haven't really talked about the Grievous affix yet, but you can see how a lot of people have 4 stacks in Abra's group here, as he had to travel to catch up with healing, had to rest a shine because he died during the fight. So lots of travel. Divine Field actually going down too. Now the boss is on 10%, so there might be a way of them finishing it off, but not having a tank. Well, there's so much damage coming in. The Peacekeeper still alive too. There's the parry, the repose coming of Dr. J, but I'm not completely sure if they can finish this off.
This is scary for sure. Smok is going to have to kite this around, but I'm not sure if they have enough. He's pumping everything he can. Concentrated Flame. I think that went to the Dr. J, actually. Looks like it went into the boss. 4% on the board. If they're able to get these foot bombs in to make the boss take extra damage, I'm not sure how they're going to kick them in. This is normally the healer's job. Static Pulse coming out as he was going to kick the foot bomb in. They have to get these into the boss, or they are going to die to the residual damage. Oof. Boss is taking extra damage, and he will go down, but man, that was scary. The important thing about killing the boss is at this point, they're allowed to release. They set a checkpoint for themselves. Divine Field can res and taunt that Peacekeeper to make sure no one dies, and boy, that was scary for Abracadabra. Even though they're able to pull it off somehow, they're still down 3 deaths to 40k's 1 death on their board, so they're going to have to do this trash here perfectly. They're still in the dungeon. There wasn't a wipe. They're still in the dungeon for sure. But man, that was scary.
Yeah, that was so well done by them to be able to still finish this up. You saw Smok there just kiting the boss and using that Lightfoot potion to gain some extra speed. The boss was getting so close to him, so good on him to be able to just use the speed potion and get the pull off. But this is a huge pull coming in by Abra. This is what we've seen by No Girls Allowed, actually, as you mentioned before. But No Girls Allowed actually having a full team wipe here, not being able to pull it off. Now let's see if Abra can do that without any sort of rests. They do have both of the DKs doing an insane amount of damage, as you see Swag and now a Shine as well, but Swag dropping very low. They did manage to recover, and all of the defensives are being popped by the DKs just to be able to survive this pull.
I mean, Swag kind of proved me wrong. I said you needed both DKs to do this pull, but Swag probably could have done that on his own. He was ascending for a long time, and Ashine's like, you know what? Yeah, I'll help you out a little bit after the fact, just for a little bit of extra damage. But I mean, Swag probably could have finished that off on his own. Now, of course, they only have these 4 extractors left to deal with. They would like to kill them all at the same time, but it doesn't really need to happen. Of course, they'll be able to cleave the Fanatical Driller out as well, but they're probably not going to focus too much damage on them. Once these Extractors go down, they'll probably knock them away and then go on to Shadow Meld them off, because they're at the trash percentage they need at this point. They really only need to pull the Taskmaster Ascari pack on top of the boss, plus maybe some of the Stone Gazers, and they'll finish their trash off.
Yeah, this is the one thing that Abra needed to do to be able to catch up to Forty here. Now, because they did this whole pull in one compared to Forty doing it in 2 pulls, they're actually the ones who are going to reach the boss first. There's still going to be a 10-second difference between those 2 teams in favor of Forty because of those differences. But yeah, both of the teams actually engaging Taskmaster Ascari here as well. So we'll see. Yeah, this is such a close game now. It's just all going to be about boss damage at this point. Once they finish up this mini boss here and the trash around it, then it's really only going to be the 3 bosses left.
Yep, there you go. They're kind of setting up to make sure Rentari has enough aggro so that when they get to the boss and the Holy Decays kind of start doing their AoE damage, they won't rip any aggro as well. So a little bit of safety coming out from Forty there as well. Actually, they might have been waiting for the cover cooldown. It's something like that as well. So once the cover comes out, they'll be able to cleave everything down on top of Taskmaster Ascari. That would make more sense to me, honestly. But yeah, you can just see the Unholy Decays. They're just going ahead, doing their thing. Wolf Disco's having the time of his life right now. No fixates on him, so he doesn't have to worry about anything. However, Curry has a 9 stack of that bleed. He's getting chunked for 60% of HP every single time that ticks. Somehow, Igloo's keeping him alive. That'll be the final tick, and wow, I mean, that was impressive. This is a Grievous Affix. He's taking extra damage on top of that, and he was able to heal through that. That was so scary.
Kurisu must really hate his healer as he just gets the 9 stacks. But Ashine, unfortunately, not so lucky. He probably hated his healer too, but Smok was saying, you know what? I'm not going to heal your 9 stacks. Unfortunately, they don't have a battle res ready on Abra's side. They will be ready in a couple of seconds. You can see the cooldown coming up here, but they're just going to cost them quite a bit, man. So unfortunate for Abra again, as they were just about to catch up to 40k, but now having the staff on Ashine here. I don't know what to say. It's probably, again, just having the fixates on them not kiting it properly. And it's also a little bit unlucky to have 3 or 4 fixates on a DK, because DK is not as mobile as, your rogue would be. But still, just having it go up to this high stacks, you just need to play it a little bit more safe, because what is a that DK gonna do, right? So you'd rather just do a little bit less damage when you kite the Earth Ragers and you just don't die, right?
I mean, you got to feel a little bad for Abracadabra with what's going on for them here, because they've looked so good this entire tournament. They've been playing incredibly well. Like we mentioned, I think earlier on yesterday, they almost seemed like they had like a chip on their shoulder, because they didn't really... A lot of people felt like the way they won last week wasn't really becoming of a team that wins a cup, and it was a little bit unfortunate, the occurrences that happened to them, but they didn't end up winning, and that's not the way you really want to win a tournament. So it looked like they were coming in this week and saying, you know what, we want to win, and we want to look fantastic while doing so. And they were looking fantastic the entire tournament. But then, at the last second, this is going on. They're having these tiny little mistakes, and if it keeps going on like this for the rest of the dungeon, we don't see anything happening to 40k, they're going to once again finish in that 3rd position that we see them finishing so many times before.
Yeah, and 40k, I mean, they're really showing up. I mean, they had this 1 death in this dungeon, but outside of that, not really any sort of problems compared to 40k, just losing so much time with their 4 deaths that they had. It really always depends on where you're going to die, right? Sometimes a death doesn't really cost you much at all. You only lose the 5 seconds, and sometimes you have to 4-mana boss fight because you don't have any battle rests left. So this is really the difference here. As 40k does engage Rixa Flux Flame, they also pull the War Machine on top to get the last percentage that they need here, while Abra already has the 100%. So there's definitely a chance that Abra has a lot more single target damage here and can catch up again, just because 40k needs to also cleave down the trash here. So it definitely means that they could, in theory, lose single target damage if they focus on the trash too much. But 40k also popping their Bloodlust here, and Abra is probably saving it for the last boss.
Yeah, of course, once again, slight differences in strategies here, where we know Abracadabra likes to get 100% trash percentage before they even move on to the 3rd boss of the dungeon, whereas, as we've seen multiple times from 40k this week, they like pulling that War Machine on top of Rixa Flux Flame, using their Army of the Deads from both Unholy DKs on top of Bloodlust to cleave everything down and get a whole bunch of nice cleave in on the boss. So it's interesting to see them side by side, just different strategies. It looks like they're almost kind of neck and neck in terms of strategies, because Abracadabra did engage Rixa Flux Flame about 20% after 40k, and of course they're going to be able to do a little bit more boss damage because they don't have to worry about doing any cleave damage. But of course, once the War Machine goes down and 40k is at 100% trash, they'll be able to kind of match the single target damage that Abracadabra is putting out as well. Now, looking at the cooldowns, both Unholy DKs do have their Army of the Deads available, it looks like, so they didn't use them on this boss, so they'll have those available for the Final Blast along with Bloodlust, but I'm not sure at this point, especially with the death timers, it's going to be enough for them to come back here.
Yeah, maybe it would be enough without the death difference, but those 15 seconds are probably going to matter a lot in the last boss. Now, the only difference, as you mentioned, is the double army plus the Bloodlust. Well, Forty only has one army on Wolf Disco. Kurisu actually did use it here in this boss in addition to the Bloodlust. Now we'll see how Forty does pull off this skip. Now usually we don't really see teams have any sort of problems with this skip here. It's not too dangerous. You just run all the way up and use your Shadow Melt at the end. There's not that many things that can go wrong here compared to like a skip in Wakecrest where you have those maggots casting spit on random target. So usually not huge problems here. The Grievous can cause some problems, but outside of that it really shouldn't be a big deal as they all use their Shadow Melt and de-aggro. Now Abracadabra doing the same thing as they start up their skip.
Once again, for the third time in Motherlode, Forty is now engaging Mogul Razdunk. No cooldowns available aside from that army from Wolf Disco, no Bloodlust. They're just going to deal with the boss the way it was meant to be, just with their normal abilities, no cheating major group cooldowns, none of that. But Mogul Razdunk, we're going to have to see, because this is a fortified instance, how much of a difference the double army plus the Bloodlust is going to make for them. They have to not only catch up this extra 30% behind the boss they are, but they also have to finish the dungeon 15 seconds faster than 40k. And we've seen 40k deal with this boss 3 times. They've had no mistakes. The other 2 times you saw them do it, and I'm assuming in their 1554 run that they had in time trials, they probably didn't have any mistakes there either. So I don't really see 40k having any problems on this boss.
Yeah, there's the Bloodlust being popped and the double army come out of Abracadabra. You can see the health of the boss melting, but not as fast as 40k. Unfortunately, they're not able to catch up as 40k got the boss to intermission already, and Abra is just now getting it. So they definitely caught up, but not enough. As you mentioned, they not only do they have to overcome 40k, but they need to be 15 seconds ahead. So I think it's just too little too late for Abra here. And there's no way to speed up this intermission phase either, because the fixate from the boss is just on a set timer. So there's no way of you to do this any faster compared to 40k. The only way would be to do the second phase faster and do more damage to the boss. But at this point, there's no cooldowns left. There's no way they can, with the same setup running as well, that they can just catch up on the damage there.
I mean, credit where credit's due. That was pretty impressive that they engaged the boss when 40k was at 70%, and they entered the intermission at almost the exact same time. If the death counters were at the same point and both teams had the same amount of deaths, this would be really impressive, really neck and neck. But the fact of the matter is both teams are running the same exact comp. Both teams have the same damage output available to them at this point, and there's really not a whole lot that Abracadabra can do to set themselves apart. I mean, 40k even got out of the intermission faster than Abracadabra did. There's no way they're going to come up with a 15-second lead at this point unless they somehow figured out a way to hack the game and do double damage for the rest of the fight.
I mean, there's a possibility. It's Dr. J after all. He does know how to do lots of damage. But either way, 40k is already at 90%, and it really doesn't look like they're having any sort of problems at all. And 40k, you really gotta say, I mean, they stepped up in this cup. We were talking about them saying that they don't really show up anymore like we are used to seeing them from the spring season. And the summer season, not really showing up in the first 2 cups. But now when it really matters and they really want to secure their BlizzCon spot, they're finishing off the boss here and they're winning against Abra 2-1.
40k completely showing up in this tournament, taking the series 2-1 over Abracadabra. Who'd have thunk it?
40k came to play, and they showed up big time on Motherlode. It's the 3rd time they've won on this dungeon alone, and they just knocked Abracadabra out of the tournament, and they've made it so that Method NA on this one, Tettles, has secured that 2nd seed for BlizzCon.
That was a really tight match at the very end. It looked like both of those strategies, even though they were a little bit different with some of the mobs that they were pulling, where they were getting count and everything else, like the Technician and the War Machine at the very end. It seems like both of these matches were very close between both of these teams, and it was proven by the time trial time. Abracadabra looked like they had just like a slight advantage at the very beginning with how they were pathing through the R&D wing, where they were getting some of their trash, and then like 40k was like pulling the boss a little bit earlier than Abracadabra, because 40k gets a little bit more trash towards the end, whereas Abracadabra gets a little bit more of their trash towards the beginning. But then it was like just a few issues on coin-operated crowd pummeling, where the Mach is running
Something
around
like
with Lightfoot and some shenanigans with the Peacekeepers and everything else. And then it was kind of close, and then a Shine is dead on Azarok, where 40k is like just 10% on the boss ahead. Both of those issues ended up culminating for a 40k win, which would have otherwise have been within, I don't know, like seconds between both of these teams. It would have been a very close match.
It would have been, but let's talk about just after the coin-operated crowd pummeler. We've seen so many aggressive pulls, some successful and some not.
Yeah, so what I actually like about this pull from Forty is the fact that they are avoiding that Void-touched emissary at all costs. That mob is
We've heard.
terror. That guy, okay, so he does percentage health on every single cast to your tank, so basically your tank is going to struggle to be able to tank all of these mobs at once while tanking the Void-touched emissary, so I think it's a really good idea of Forty to be looking to pull around that pretty much as possible. And then you see the pack just getting completely obliterated by those double Death Knights doing insane amounts of damage, and then Rentari just walks away like nothing happened.
Yeah, he was able to be very successful onto that one, and how quickly they're able to kill them also just makes it so much easier for the tanks. They just front load all of their defensives and then they're fine onto that one.